So, an armada is defined as a large fleet of ships coming from the Spanish word armed or armed. The biggest example was King Philip II of Spain. In 1588, he sent an armada to invade England, and he failed horribly. He was unsuccessful. We've built the largest armada off the coast of South America in history, and I've been talking about it for a while, and I think we have our full reason as to why it's happening. President Trump has announced a blockade, a full blockade of all U.S. sanctioned ships, oil rigs, anything going to or from Venezuela. Now, side note, the term blockade is considered an act of war. It's generally a military operation. It means to physically block stuff like humanitarian aid going into a country, or illegal drugs, or oil, or weapons, or whatever. So from President Trump's social post, kind of long, I'm not going to read the whole thing, hit a few key points. Venezuela is completely surrounded by the largest armada ever assembled in the history of South America. Trump wrote in a lengthy post on Truth Social. He wrote this on Truth Social. It will only get bigger, and the shock to them will be like nothing they have ever seen before, until such time as they return to the United States all oil, land, and other assets they have presently stole from us. Now, one thing I wanted to say is that this reminds me of when, right before Russia invaded, not Crimea in 2014, but the rest of Ukraine, was it 2020? And so 2021. The thing is that when they had all those troops lined up on the border, and everybody was wondering, are they going to attack Kyiv? Are they going to hit them with missiles? Are they going to hit them with drones? Are they going to go in the country? And Russia was just giving all these different reasons as to why they were doing stuff. It was biolabs, and then they kind of mentioned it was to kind of get the Nazis out of Ukraine, and it was saying to protect the Russian-speaking folks that live in Ukraine, and all of those reasons were shot down. And for we American people, we've been given reasons as to what's going on out in Venezuela. I'm not saying any of them have been shot down. I'm not making like a direct comparison. I'm just saying that it gives me the same vibes, and I really would love to know the reason why. I think we got it from that post when it says, until they return all the oil, land, and other assets previously stole from us. So there's an article from Forbes, and this article itself was initially published in 2017. They followed up with that article here in December of 2025. They ruined their own oil industry. And the one thing I wanted to talk about with this is that in 1976, they being Venezuela, took over oil and made it a socialist program. They made it for the state. But they began to get greedy. And so in 2007, oil prices were on the rise, and the Hugo Chavez government, which preceded Maduro, sought more revenue from investments made by international oil companies such as BP, Exxon, etc. Now, some of these companies totally agreed to the new requirements that Venezuela laid on top of them. Those companies were Chevron, BP, but a few companies completely didn't want to do it. Those are ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips. And when they refused, their assets, their land, their rights to oil were all taken by Venezuela. So this is the only example that I could find where, I guess, American companies, and some of these are British companies and Canadian companies, but American companies had a vested interest in Venezuela, and it was taken from them. Because you got to remember, the president's post said, until you return oil, land, and other assets. I mean, it sounds similar to like reappropriation or eminent domain is what kind of happened in Venezuela, but maybe I'm missing that. I'm not sure, because over the first 3 months of this conflict, this is the first time I've heard anything about some stolen land or oil. And I've said all along, I think this has to do with oil and regime change. But the regime change, I'm starting to think that Maduro has to go with everything that's been going on down there. But let's just say, if he really played ball this whole time, I think that there could be like a super slim chance that he could just stay there if they just give up that oil, baby. Let our companies back in there. Now, side note is that although we have this whole situation going on where We're talking about oil and we're talking about land and assets. According to Politico, the Trump administration is asking U.S. oil industry to return to Venezuela, but so far they have no takers. And the administration's asking U.S. oil companies if they're interested in returning to Venezuela once Nicolas Maduro is gone. Four people familiar with the discussions told Politico. So far, they've gotten nothing but hard no's from different companies. Now, I think that's just as it is right now. I think that if I'm the CEO of BP or Phillips or ConocoPhillips, and you ask me, if we get rid of the leadership of this country, are you willing to roll in there and take that oil? I think I would say no initially. I mean, I wouldn't want other countries hearing that, right? Imagine you're another country, BP's not in the country, and you hear the answers yes, you're going to be like, oh my God, we're next. America's going to come here next because the oil companies want it. So I could understand that. But if we really took over the assets of oil in a country, come on now, that's money. You already know what the deal is. They're going to be down there making the things happen. But I don't think it's so simple as we see it, because we are in a blockade. We've had 2 near misses in the aircrafts with a JetBlue flight that was coming from Curacao. They had a private jet that was leaving Aruba and heading to Miami. So there's an investigation of what the hell happened with that, because they had another military craft that got into their flight path. So we got a lot of dangerous things happening in the region. And so something has to break. Here's the thing that may break, because according to the New York Times, the Venezuelan Navy is trying to call the U.S. government's bluff on this blockade. They are now escorting vessels in defiance of Trump's blockade, and it's saying that the Venezuelan Navy escorts vessels in defiance of Trump blockade threat. Pentagon officials, surprised by President Trump's order, they actually scrambled to figure out how they were going to halt sanctioned tankers. So some Pentagon officials had no clue that Truth Social post was coming. And on the other side, Nicolas Maduro and Venezuela leaders vowed resistance. And this is the first sign of resistance, with them escorting tankers from their country. Now, the country's oil industry is their biggest line of revenue income. I mean, unless they are making a lot of money from this drug, I don't know. But I'm just saying, like, officially. And so a lot of ships that are leaving Venezuela heading towards Asia were under naval escorts Tuesday evening and Wednesday morning. Pentagon, U.S. troops that are in the area, Navy, the Venezuelan Navy, in the same pathways. Because if one of those ships that are leaving Venezuela is identified as U.S. sanctioned, what if the military has to go through and actually cease or stop that ship? And normally for the U.S., stopping U.S. sanctioned vessels is a law enforcement action. Normally you get a court order from a judge. And normally we would have like the Coast Guard with support from the military seize a vessel. That's how we're able to do it. And so if we have all these different vessels, we have their call signs. What country's flag are they flying? Do we have a court order? Are they a part of the blockade and we're going to block them? Are we going to engage with the Venezuelan Navy? I think this gets bigger than we think. And this is when it really starts to make me think, as we see oil prices already starting to rise. And at its peak in the late 90s, Venezuela used to pump out nearly 3 million barrels of oil per day. They're nowhere near that nowadays. But this partial blockade that the president announced on Tuesday is already under tremendous pressure from the Venezuelan Navy. Nicolas Maduro doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And this just has a lot of vibes of things could just spiral out of control very, very quickly. What do I think about all this? I think that as we get closer to the release of things that politicians don't want to be released, like Epstein files, or we get close to major votes in the House for like healthcare subsidies and stuff like that, I'll let you guys worry about the politics of that stuff. But sometimes people will wag the tail to distract the dog. And this is just one of those moments where, could a war be a possible solution to things that's going on here in America for some politicians? I don't know. I am concerned about the people that I used to serve with, people that are still serving, and our treasure. I think this is probably costing a lot of money to keep those vessels in the area, run those vessels. And we, the American people, really have not been fully bought in until this post from the president, which has to do, he's mentioning things that I've mentioned before, which sounds like blood for oil 2.0. I mean, it's a lot there to digest. None of that posting really talked about the biggest reason why we first went there, hence why I went with my Russian analogy, which is that drugs. We're really kind of leaning towards the land. I mean, me personally, just kind of like, from my take, is I absolutely would love the ability to see the family that I have in Venezuela and the property that our family owns in Venezuela, and go there and just really enjoy the people that we love. And this is really a hard thing to get through on a personal level, because I see what's going on and I see the inability to do that. Like in the past, we used to have to meet them in Trinidad and Tobago, but that relationship has soured because Trinidad and Tobago's participation with the United States. So now we got to think about meeting them in places like Curacao or Aruba. Bigger picture, man, this is a lot of pressure when it comes to us Americans, thinking about the amount of money and troops that we may have to put into this fight. But imagine being a Venezuelan, not knowing if your recently recruited uncle who's in his 40s is going to have to go to war, or that old rickety naval vessel is going to be able to make the cut, or components of your Air Force is going to be able to not fall out of the sky. I don't know. First time stopping by, hit the subscribe button. I would love to have you part of the battalion. This is a lot of info to kind of digest. I was literally about to sit here and do some modifications to the M-LOK and to some of the rails on some of my ARs. And then I saw this stuff pop up. I actually watched the president's address yesterday, because I really thought he was going to be announcing land strikes. He really kind of stuck to domestic politics and domestic policies. But I really thought we were going to be getting some announcements of action in Venezuela. And it's kind of a relief, I guess, that we didn't. But I mean, if this is not your first time stopping by, well, thank you once again for watching me run my grape. It is time for coffee and cigars. So that's what I'm about to do. For everyone else, we'll speak soon.